Today I want to talk about the direction that I think that we're going as a society, and I actually take a much more optimistic view than a lot of the red pill creators on YouTube. For a long time now, I feel like I've seen a lot of the MGTOW creators adopt an almost black-pilled view of the future. Given the state of the world right now in 2020, I think that way of thinking is understandable, and perhaps I'm too much of an optimist. But I don't believe that all hope is lost. I think that a lot of what we're seeing right now is the effect that the red pill is starting to have on the world. Even if those in power don't understand why it's happening, they're seeing their control start to slip, and the chaos that we find ourselves in right now is simply the waves crashing against the rocks, so to speak. Now, I know that MGTOW don't necessarily spend a lot of time thinking about how to fix society. By and large, most of us is simply checked out and are focused on ourselves. But I have a son who's close to becoming a teenager now, so I worry about what the world will look like when he grows up. Because of that, I've spent a lot of time thinking about where we as a society are headed, or about where I think that we should be headed. Now, one direction that I don't think that we are headed to is back to traditionalism. Barring a full collapse of society, something that I think is extremely unlikely in this day and age, I don't see us ever going back to a state where women stayed home in the kitchen while men stayed slaved away at work all day. And I actually think that that's a good thing, because despite what the trad cooks like to say, those were not the glory days for men. In fact, even then, women still had the better deal. Men were still trapped living as wage slaves, never able to experience the freedom of the confirmed bachelor like we do now. And just because a man's wife couldn't divorce him on a whim, that didn't mean that for the man it was a happy marriage. I mean, just think about it. How many men do you know that have been married for more than a few years who are happy? How many of those men are sexually satisfied? How many of those men look forward to waking up next to their expensive, naggy, post-wall, ever-expanding wife for the rest of their lives? One way that you could look at a traditional marriage was simply as a way of ensuring that a man would provide for a woman and her children. And if you look at our current situation with family courts, it is essentially the same system. Only now, by way of things like child support and alimony, the system cuts out the need for the marriage to last more than a few years. So depending on how you want to look at it, the current situation could actually be considered an improvement for men. At least now a man can go his own way, rebuild his finances, and find happiness later in life, even if he got taken to the cleaners in his 30s. Now, I'm not discounting how difficult divorce can be for a man, especially if he's been alienated from his children. I'm just pointing out that with our current system, a man who has made the mistake of getting married has more freedom to correct that mistake and go on to live a happy life than a man in past generations did. But going back to the question of where I think we are headed as a society, one thing I've come to believe is that as a species, human beings have become very good at self-correcting. Otherwise, I don't think we would have ever survived as long as we have. Change comes slow, though. It can take decades or even centuries for a change to take hold. I think that is mostly because when society shifts, it does so generation by generation. The children born today will grow up looking at the mistakes that their parents made, and they will resolve to do better when they are adults. Of course, sometimes they don't actually do better. The millennials, for example, grew up being indoctrinated by the feminists and the Marxist boomers, and they have made a grand mess of things for the most part. But what has been the result of this mess? For one, we have seen the rise of the MGTOW and the Red Pill movement. We've seen marriage rates fall to the lowest levels in recorded history. Men, even many blue-pilled men, are now waking up to how bad of a deal marriage is and rejecting it en masse. Even women are starting to feel the pinch. How many of those once proud feminists of 20 or 30 years ago are now living out lives of being old, poor, and alone? Every day today, a carousel rider wakes up to find that she is now a post-wall cat lady. And it seems like barely a week goes by where I don't hear about some woman writing an article in the New York Times about where have all the good men gone. Slowly but surely, even women are waking up to the realization that feminism has lied to them. They're starting to see that they can't jump on every pogo stick they come across in their 20s and 30s and then still find a good man to marry just before the clock strikes midnight on their 40th birthday. And if there's one thing that you can count on women to do, that is to look out for their own self-interest. While it might be too late for most of the women who are writing riding the carousel today, these women will eventually wind up as a cautionary tale for the younger generation. TFM and many other MGTOW creators like to point out that you can't change the system because women vote, and they won't let you change anything. While it is true that women vote, and that they do make up a small majority of the population, rarely does society change based on what happens in the voting booth. What the problem really is blue-pilled men that will do anything women want. They are the ones that make and enforce the laws that oppress men, and without the help of men, a woman can't make a man do anything. So the future that I want to see happen, and I believe that we will get there eventually, even if it takes a few more generations, is simply one where the laws are fair to men. A future where systems like child support and alimony simply do not exist. And I think we'll get there not because MRA has petitioned the government or because we voted in the right politicians. I believe we'll get there because women will eventually demand it, and the blue-pilled simps will support them. I know that this might sound crazy, but the reason I believe this is because there is nothing that women want more than to be provided for or protected by a man. It's simply in her biology. That is how we evolved as a species, and no matter how successful a woman is on her own, she always desires a man to fulfill that role. As men, we can be happy going our own way, but women are miserable alone. The outdated one-sided child support and alimony laws have made modern-day marriage into nothing more than an insurance policy for the woman at the expense of the man. And like I said earlier, even the average blue-pill man is waking up to the reality of what a shit deal marriage is. Marriage right now in 2020 is quickly becoming an obsolete tradition. Now, one thing I often say about women is that women are no more aware of female nature than the average blue-pilled man. Most women are not looking to get married just so that they can divorce rape a man and take all his money. They want the same thing that most men do, at least in the beginning of their relationship. So for these women that are not already married, getting rid of child support and alimony won't seem like that big of a deal because they intend to stay married for life. And if the men are refusing to get married because of how one-sided divorce laws are in this country, it will be the women that will eventually demand that those laws be reformed. Because getting married, even without the availability of cash and prizes, will still be a better deal for women than not being able to get married at all. Now, definitely not for me because I value my freedom too much, but I think that for a lot of men, if not for the extreme likelihood of getting bent over in a divorce court, then getting married still might make sense. If two people could simply divide up their assets, shake hands, and go their separate ways in a divorce, then I think it'd be worth it for most men who really want a family. I've thought about it a lot, and there is one thing that I'm certain of, and that is that our current system can't endure much longer. I really do think that this is the direction that we as a society are going to start heading in sooner or later, and the best thing about it is that we don't have to do anything to make it happen. We just have to continue to do what we are doing, spreading the red pill and going our own way. Because for every man we red pill, that is one more man that won't put his head in the noose that we call marriage, and that will in turn put that much more pressure on women. Like I said, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but this is just one theory I have. Worst case scenario though, I'm wrong, we all just continue to go our own way. Well, thanks for listening guys. Please like, share, and subscribe if you're so inclined. Later.